This is the true story of my Hmong father's survival after the 1976 Tangshan earthquake. On the morning of July 28, 1976, Zijin's father, Li Gong, left their home in Beijing for a business trip to the Tangshan steel plant. That night, Zijin was fast asleep when her mother suddenly grabbed her to help her urinate. Out of nowhere, the protective talisman, with the character piece hanging around her neck, began to burn hot. At that moment, a rumbling sound, like muffled thunder, erupted from beneath the building, as if a giant beast was stirring underground. Run! Her mother, without a second thought, scooped up Zijin and her 5-year-old brother and bolted for the door. Zijin, dazed and confused, stared at the flickering lights in the hallway. Then she glanced at the talisman in her hand. Oh no! The butterfly wings embroidered with gold thread were oozing blood. This blood came from the cinnabar that Grandma had used to dot the butterfly's eyes, as her father had explained that morning when he tucked the talisman with the character safety into his briefcase before leaving. Blood-red sky. The entire compound was in chaos, with people scrambling like headless flies, huddling in the open space, trembling with fear. The eastern sky glowed with an eerie red. The gatekeeper, Old Zhao, fumbled and dropped his enamel mug with a clatter, muttering, "The east of Beijing, this is a sign of upheaval." Zijin clutched her scalding talisman tightly, sensing something terrible was about to happen. Bad news. On the third day at noon, workers from the Design Institute carried sacks of flour into the compound. The bald director, waving blueprints in his hand, shouted, "The metallurgical guest house where Li Gong was staying has collapsed. Only half a steel beam is left standing." Upon hearing this, Zijin's mother lost her mind, grabbed a pair of scissors, and tried to cut the talisman from Zijin's neck. The neighbors quickly intervened, holding her back. "He's resting at the compound gate." Barefoot and without hesitation, Zijin dashed out, following the girls to the family compound entrance. There, on the steps, sat a man covered in dirt, leaning against the wall and gasping for breath. Upon closer look, it was her father, Li Gong. In his hand, he still clutched the talisman with the character, now wrapped in wire, the fabric torn into shreds, but the gold thread still glimmering faintly. He told the family that it was this Hmong protective talisman that had brought him safely home. In those days, feudal superstitions were forbidden, but at home, Father shared with us how the Hmong talisman had saved his life. On the night of July 28, 1976, he awoke grudgingly from a dream. The ceiling fan in the Tangshan guest house was still whirring, but suddenly, plaster from the walls rained down onto his pillow. A sound like silver bells rang sharply in his ears. It was unmistakably the crisp clinking of his Hmong grandmother's silver head ornaments. He snapped his eyes open to see moonlight casting sinister cracks across the floor through the window. The enamel mug on the bedside table was dancing, and fine sand seeped from the wall cracks like a golden snake. "Joe, run!" Someone shouted his childhood name in Hmong dialect. As he rolled off the bed, the load-bearing beam grazed his neck and crashed onto the mattress. The corridor was twisted like a pretzel, and through the cracks, moonlight revealed the talisman emitting a faint green smoke. Father ran through the ruins for 3 hours, his throat raw with the taste of rust. His right plastic sandal had long disappeared, and every step left a bloody footprint. Suddenly, the talisman in his arms grew hot, sending a jolt through his heart. As he rounded a mound, he saw a convoy of plot trucks heading into Tangshan. Desperately, Li Gong waved at them. One truck stopped, and a soldier jumped down from the back, shouting, "Comrade!" The soldier steadied his stumbling body and handed him a military canteen. As the water flowed down his throat, the talisman's heat gradually faded. Father continued groping his way toward Beijing. A light rain began to fall, and ahead he spotted an abandoned temple. Without hesitation, he entered the main hall and curled up under the altar to eat a compressed biscuit given to him by the pla soldier. Suddenly, the talisman vibrated violently, and 3 of its threads snapped. He scrambled out of the temple, and just as the roof beam crashed down on the spot where he had been hiding, the tremor lasted 20 seconds. Kneeling in the mud, he touched the talisman, and saw dark stains seeping through the faded red cloth, forming an arrow shape. Following these faint marks, he avoided 3 freshly collapsed sections of the road. At night, he found a grove, leaned against a tree to nap, and set off again at first light toward Beijing, where his wife and children awaited. As he walked, his vision blurred, but the talisman suddenly turned ice cold. Instinctively, he stopped. The asphalt road ahead looked intact, but upon closer inspection, spider-web-like cracks were spreading in the sunlight. Half a compressed biscuit rolled out of his satchel, tracing a path along the edge of the crack. He carefully followed the biscuit's trail, and behind him, a sickening cracking sound rang out. Turning around, he broke into a cold sweat as a 3-meter-wide chasm swallowed the ground where he had just stood. The soreness of Li Gong's cloth shoes were worn through by the gravel, and the talisman had burned blisters onto his collarbone. The North China Plain was riddled with fissures, and he witnessed a fleeing man being engulfed by gushing black sand. Li Gong limped onward. As the outline of Beijing came into view, an enormous butterfly landed on his shoulder. Annoyed, he tried to swat it away, but suddenly, his grandmother's voice thundered in his mind. "That is the guiding butterfly of our ancestors." Trembling, he allowed the butterfly to flutter around him, leading him from Tong County all the way back to Baiguang Road, inside the second ring. Time flowed gently, and many years passed in the blink of an eye. Zijin's father, Li Gong, lived peacefully to the age of 83. As his life drew to a close, strange signs began to appear. During the days when father lay semi-conscious with pneumonia, the house was often filled with the faint sound of silver bells, crisp and melodious, as if his Hmong grandmother's silver ornaments were clinking together. But whenever the family listened closely, the sound would vanish. One evening, the setting sun painted the sky a brilliant red, reminiscent of the eerie yet magnificent blood-red sky during the Tangshan earthquake. Li Gong lay peacefully in bed, a serene smile on his face, and with his family by his side, he took his last breath. Zijin, thinking of the Hmong silver bells, believed that her father had followed the guidance of their ancestors and embarked on another journey. The talisman in her hand grew slightly warm, as if recounting the family's legend and legacy.